the biblical literature is in their language, and the practices that God practices in the Bible is from that culture. So we got a problem. And so now, remember, the groundwork, Ivan, was already set. The groundwork, Mr. and Mrs. Facebook, was already set for Europeanization. But because everybody was already used to what? Greek, already used to Rome, already used to trying to find an amenable way to kind of coexist. Am I making sense? Now, and remember, I told you when you would conquer a nation, you would come in, you would build cities and you would build monuments that would reflect your way of life, right? So now, if you can imagine in Israel, when Rome began to lord over Israel, they started building things like colosseums in Israel. Why? Because part of the Roman life was the gladiators and the horse races. And that was a life where you would go and you would spend days at the plays and watching theater and everything else, right? Right. So now if you can imagine this, Tammy, that the Romans are building these huge colosseums with theaters and amphitheaters, everything else, to enjoy the arts of life. How do Jews feel about that? They're like, that despicable life where y'all are acting and killing and betting and everything else. We farm our land. We teach our kids to trade. We work hard, and then we at the synagogue and everything else worshiping God. So now you got the synagogue over here, and you got the theater and the Colosseum over here. And they're taxing you to build more and more Roman types of lifestyles. It's a clash of cultures. It's a clash of civilizations. And so now you as a Jew, you would never, ever, ever catch yourself at the theater. You wouldn't never catch yourself at the Colosseum watching the barbarians. Some of y'all say you sneak over there. I look at y'all. It's a clash of cultures. So now understand this. So now when you say things like this, I remember the days when we didn't do nothing on Sundays. If Sunday was set aside for God and everything else. You know what? It's a clash of cultures. Now, and remember, Sunday used to be the old school, I'm going way back, blue laws. Wasn't nothing open. You didn't have nothing to do but go to church. But now what? But they changed the laws now, and then it went from things open. Remember, you couldn't buy liquor at certain times, everything else. Not that I know about that. I'm just saying. But now you got now the whole world is open up, and now what happens on the weekends, on Saturdays? What are you doing? You at your kid's football game? It used to be you see a soccer game on Sunday, you be like, what is wrong with them? Football game? What do you mean y'all got a tournament on a Sunday? Now we're like, Pastor, I ain't gonna be at church. When? The rest of the year. My kids try to get a scholarship. Why? Listen, and churches will shut down early during football season because they know better than try to have service while the game is on. And some churches, pastor had a game on underneath the pulpit. Not that I know. And so Rome had a problem because now we got to figure out now how to. We can't let this culture be lowered, right? Because if we say that who they practice, how they practice is right, because we Romanize, we say Christianity is right. So now, how can we say that Christianity is the God of Rome when the God of Rome isn't from Rome? So now we got to figure out how to take this Hebrew God and bring him over to Rome. Because that would be political suicide to say that your God, the Hebrew practices, is Lord. We can say Christianity is right, but we got to divorce Christianity from the Jews. So they Romanized, and then they began to Europeanize. Go to my next slide here. Am I making sense to you? Am I logically building this argument so you can see it? So now, we have to get rid of the language. We have to get rid of, we've already said that Greek was the main language, right? And everything else. But now we've got to figure out how to get rid of this whole Hebraic language. Because the problem with these Hebrew people and the problem with these Christian people is they're too strong. And they won't bow down. Because Roman law said, okay, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you say Caesar is God. If you would just say that, then we don't care what you do. Just repeat openly, Caesar is God. That's why the early Christians were called atheists. The first atheists were Christians because they did not believe or they denied the fact that Caesar was God. So they called them atheists. And so the issue was, how do we change these people? Because everybody that tried to tell the Jews to give it up, they found out the Jews fought back too violently. And they were too adamant, and they were willing to die for this. And they were like, what is wrong with y'all? And then the Christians were worse because they were like, not only is our God one, but his name is Jesus Christ. So they was like, man, can y'all just chill on the Jesus Christ stuff? That's why you see in Acts 5, when they said, you can no longer preach in Jerusalem the name Jesus Christ. And this was the Jews saying it and the politicians. Because they were like, that name's too divisive. We all right here. We've learned to coexist. Rome is here. We're here. Chill out. And what did they do? They prayed for boldness and then walked around preaching Jesus and getting people baptized in the Holy Ghost. So people talking about Jesus and and they were like, oh, these fools right here. And so when you read Acts chapter 5, Acts chapter 4 and 5, you will see them getting in trouble with the Jews and with the politicians because they were the ones that were stirring up trouble in the city. Because Rome was like, okay, it's enough of this. And then finally, Rome got tired not only of the Christians, but they got tired of the Jews. So in 70 AD, the Roman centurion came into Jerusalem. They had built another capital in the city. So they built a Roman capital and said Jerusalem is no longer the capital. Can you imagine somebody walking in and saying, this is no longer the capital. It's right here. We just built a new one. Now y'all come here. Can you imagine the pushback, the offense? Well, they did this. And so they were attacking the Jews because the Jews were obstinate. So they destroyed the temple in 70 AD. And Jewish historians say there was not one brick that was laying on one brick. They destroyed the temple down to the floor and made sure that there was not one element of the temple that stood on the other. And that when they destroyed the temple, when they destroyed the temple, they tried to destroy the literature, and then they went through and they killed most of the Jews in Jerusalem. And when they killed most of the Jews in Jerusalem, those were the Jewish-speaking Jews. I'm sorry, the Hebrew-speaking Jews. They killed them, and when they killed them, all of those who had traditionally been speaking Hebrew for years, most of that era was dead. And because they wanted to get rid of the whole Hebrew culture, and you start out by destroying the language. If you remember world history in South Africa, in Soweto, one of the biggest revolts that really brought the world's attention to the issue of apartheid was when in Soweto, the English white government that was over South Africa was trying to change everything. And in one summer, they said the African dialect is no longer the dialect. and they changed all of the books. So if you imagine, you went to school in 6th grade, and all of your books were written in English. And then you left and you went to school next year, and they were in another language. And the kids in Soweto rebelled. And you'll see a very famous picture, if you look at it, of this rebellion in Soweto, where this young boy is carrying his dead sister, and he's crying because there were children throwing rocks and bottles, and the military came in and was shooting them. And they took the picture, and that's what let the world know about the atrocities of apartheid. But it was because they understood if you change a people, the first thing you take is their language. So they destroyed the temple. And then about 135 years later, the remnants of the Hebrews, because the Jews keep fighting back, they had a revolt right here called the Bar Kokhba revolt. And in this revolt, they fought back violently to save their people and their language. And some historians say over 500,000 Jews died that day in that revolt because the Romans came in and wrecked shop. And when they killed everybody, it literally killed most of the people who spoke Hebrew language. And so that's why Hebrew is known scientifically or theologically as a dead language, because they killed everyone who was speaking the language. See, I want you to understand how powerful this is. So when you talk about Europeanization, we're not talking about just painting a picture. You're talking about destroying a language and a people and everything else, all remnants of it, because you want everything to look like, feel like, and be like this. And so now that means most of the native Hebrew speakers were dead. Why? Because they were kicked out of Jerusalem, and they weren't allowed to come back in. This is what happened in 70 AD. And so some Hebrew scholars who really understood Hebrew knew how to write and read in Hebrew, and so they treasured that, and they kept it, and they began to write in their traditions in Hebrew, and that's why they still write in Hebrew, but Hebrew was known as a dead language because many people don't speak it. It's not dead because it doesn't exist. It's dead just because of linguistically, a lot of people don't speak it. Does that make sense? Now,
thank you for worshiping with us today. If you liked this message, you can find the rest at cmllcstore.com. We invite you to join us again for our extraordinary worship services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m., Sundays at 4 p.m., and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, where Dr. Moody teaches how to understand the Bible, and you can get all your biblical questions answered. We look forward to connecting with you. We ask that you subscribe to The Rock ATX on YouTube and follow The Rock ATX on Facebook and Instagram to stay connected to all The Rock is doing. You can also get connected on our website at therockatx.org. Again, thank you for worshiping with us, and be blessed.